What up, people?
What's going on, everybody?
Man, welcome to the Freedmen's Collective for what is this? This is Tuesday, May 17th, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's been
Man,
a lot of crazy things going on, man.
I tell you what, man. I tell you what, it's been an eventful week. We were just on last week, though, weren't we?
Yeah, we said it last week. You said you never know what might pop up in the timeline. So,
You never know. You never know. Well, I'm Darvell. I'm gonna be, hitting the buttons for today's show, and I also host it. But we also got to give it up to the man's Ernest.
what's going on, everybody? I'm Ernest. You already know I'm out here in Michigan, like every other show, ready to have a discussion. I know today we're going to be talking about what happened in Buffalo, and then we're also going to be talking about what happened out here in Michigan as it relates to the reparations conversation. And so, to kick off, I guess, kick us off talking about the local beat, right, Darvell? Last week we talked about parity in Detroit, and we talked about, the economic disparity reports that were published by the Federal Reserve. And so this week we actually want to talk about what the state of Michigan has been supposedly, quote unquote, doing to address that. And, in order to do that, we need to talk about a task force that was established by Governor Gretchen Whitmer last year called BLAC or BLAC, which is Black Leadership Advisory Council.
Let me go ahead and share that right now. I got a
a link. My bad. Let me drop this link in the group chat real quick.
All right. While he does that, I just want to show everyone the little bit of that right there. So, yeah, like he said, the Black Leadership Advisory Council is a group that was appointed by the governor, and the state legislator had to approve, I believe.
Hey, Darv, you can hear me, right, Darvell?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, so I ain't gonna pull it up, but since you got that up, that's perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and read why BLAC was established. So, the Black Leadership Advisory Council has been charged with identifying barriers in the Black community and education, community safety, health, and business leadership. BLAC will act in an advisory capacity to the governor to develop, review, and recommend policies and actions designed to eradicate and prevent discrimination and racial inequity in Michigan. And so I think that actually aligns. This is coming directly from the website, Darvell. So if we want to keep on going, I want to go ahead and start reading about the vision. So the vision says, our vision is that there are over 1.4 million Black Michiganders, and the state recognizes gaps and barriers that affect the Black community. BLAC is charged with accomplishing several goals to help eliminate racial inequities in Michigan, identifying state laws or gaps in state law that create or perpetuate inequities with the goal of promoting economic growth and wealth equity of the Black community, collaborating with the government office and Black community to promote legislation and regulation that ensures equitable treatment for all Michiganders and seeks to remedy structural inequities in the state, serving as a resource for the community groups on issues, programs, sources of funding, and compliance requirements within the state government to benefit and advance the interests of the Black community, promoting the cultural arts within the Black community through coordinated efforts, advocacy, collaboration with the state government, and lastly, providing other information or advice or taking other actions as requested by the governor. And so with that being said, I just wanted to make sure our audience had a preface of what this task force or what this council has been tasked with, completing, what their goals are. And with that, just this last, what was that, Darvell? Last Thursday, right?
Yeah, that was actually on the 11th, was it?
On
the 11th or the 12th, yep.
Yep, so just this last Thursday, BLAC has had I guess a final meeting where they're going over 11 proposals that they're going to give to the governor. Like I said before, they were established in 2020. And so over this last year, they've been meeting and coming up with proposals, talking about certain issues and what they can do realistically to help the Black community. And so if we want, Darvell, we could go ahead and dive into those proposals. I know we have a video, if you guys want to actually check it out, it's on YouTube. You know what I'm saying?
Let me just hit them with the intro that was given. The intro can explain essentially what Ernest said there also, but you can hear it directly from the words of the council themselves. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop on over to their video on YouTube, which, by the way, is unlisted.
It's
So
unlisted.
it's unlisted. You can't Google it.
Mm.
You can't Google that up. No, they don't want you to Google it up. So hold on. Let me go on ahead and switch over to that tab, because apparently, well, we got a brother who joined us as well. While I do that, man, what's going on, conspiracy brother?
Hey, what up? You know, my CP time got the better of me, and so 8 o'clock. I apologize, fellas, but I'm glad to be here. Dissecting this garbage with y'all. I couldn't think of a better group of fellas to be doing this with. I only wish the brother Gerard could be here.
Yeah.
Condolences to him in this time. I don't want to say too much because it's personal issues, but wish he could be here. Wishing him, condolences and all the best.
Yes, please send positive wishes and prayers to his family. Everyone who's watching live and those who may tune in later, please do send positive vibes to our brother Gerard Abin Lamont. So we got a video here. Let's play a little bit of it. Make sure, if you can hear the audio, make sure if you don't hear the audio, let me know.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair Bell. It's such a pleasure for me to be here today. This is a very important moment in Black's history. BLAC is, as Co-Chair Bell mentioned, a relatively new organization. We were just founded in 2020 with the charge of giving the governor policy recommendations designed to help the Black community here in Michigan. And so I'm so happy to be able to present these 11 recommendations that we believe will be a benefit to the Black citizens of Michigan. And with that, I'm going to share my screen. Just one moment.
Somebody should have told her
Range
about that face she was making.
Cultural issues to our economic issues that are important, education issues that.
So we're gonna stop right there as far as watching the video for the sake of it. But essentially, what they do in this video is they go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, several of their recommendations, and they have some back and forth regarding the recommendations between some of the different council members. And then they take a Q&A at the end, which I think what we can do, Ernest, is we can go through the actual report and look at their recommendations and talk to them ourselves, and then we can look at their Q&A to close up this segment.
That's a bet. Yeah, that's a bet.
All right.
So, yeah. Yep. So, like you guys heard, they had 11 proposals, right? And I want you guys, the audience, to look at the priority, right? Remember what I said their task was. Their task was to identify and eliminate racial inequities in Michigan. And so you got to remember the priorities of some of these bills. And then you got to also remember from like the economic standpoint, is this what those bills will achieve?
Right. So let's look at this here.
Or proposals, so to say.
Right. Policy proposals. All right. So we're at the first one. Support the Crown Act. Now, we'll read this opening statement on what it is. In 2020, researchers at Michigan State University conducted 4 studies that found that Black women with natural hairstyles face bias in the job recruitment process. The study showed that Black women with natural hairstyles were perceived as less professional and competent. So the recommendation was that the Black Leadership Advisory Council urges the Michigan legislature to pass and Governor Whitmer to sign the Michigan Crown Act to outlaw hair discrimination in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Ernest. Now, my whole thing with the Crown Act, right? And I'm somebody who actually lost out on this. So I used to have dreads, and I was interviewing for like J.P. Morgan and all of that good stuff. And they were saying we're very conservative here. And the lady, it was a Black lady I was interviewing with her, and she was saying, before you go to the main interview, just keep in mind they're real conservative. So how attached to you are you to your dreads? And I said, I mean, I could cut my hair, It's not like that'll stop me from getting an opportunity. And So with all of that being said, long story short, I didn't get the job anyway. I suffered from this, but it was more so the discrimination, I'll say, of me being black versus my hairstyle, right? And so my whole issue with the Crown Act, for it to be placed number one is a problem, because I believe that if you scroll up, Darville, you can see there's 12 states already that have adopted the Crown Act: California, New Jersey, Virginia, Colorado, New York, Washington, Maryland, Connecticut, New Mexico, Delaware, Nebraska, and Illinois. Even with this law adopted, employment discrimination, income discrimination, all of these things still exist for the black community. And so my whole issue is that I don't believe the Crown Act does enough to address the corporate disparities, outside of saying, it is wrong to discriminate against black people for their hairstyle, or to even try to dictate that hairstyle. That's my 2 cents on that. What you got, Stead?
Well, I kind of made myself I won't say it's like a bet or a deal or anything, but like I didn't want to work a job where I got to shave or cut my hair. Like that's my, and so like I've just made that decision that if that's a job where they require me to do that, I mean, I'm not interested. And that might seem like silly or whatever, but that's just my personal choice. On the issue of like natural hair, I've had long hair pretty much since I was 11 in some capacity. I had dreads, I had braids before. I cut it for like 3 or 4 years, and then I grew it back. And so I think this is a good thing to have. In general, I think it's good to have this. But just to kind of reiterate what you said, it's not a priority. As somebody with long hair and a beard, and I don't shave. I mean, I don't line my beard up. I don't line my hair up. You know what I mean? I wear beads. Like, this ain't a priority. When people are able, I mean, because there are people who look like me, who have jobs at, places that pay them good money, decent money, elite organizations, Cornell West, Harvard, Princeton, Union Theological Seminary. He's just one person I can think of off the top of my head who's worn an afro basically his whole adult life. And I'm not trying to make excuses or whatever, but this isn't a priority. California, where most people live in California, is too expensive for black people to live. New York, same. New Jersey, same. Virginia, I lived in Northern Virginia. I lived in Alexandria. Too expensive for black people to live comfortably in single family homes. Washington State, same. Maryland, same. Connecticut, same. Illinois, same. I don't know how many black people live in Nebraska, but not many, because not many people live in Nebraska in general. Delaware, I'd imagine it's the same. I drove through there one time going to Pennsylvania when I lived in Virginia. And I know they have a lot of black people in Delaware per capita. I think they have the most black people in the country per capita. But they don't live a fabulous life in Delaware. And I don't know how many black people live in New Mexico. I mean, I know there are some who are moving to that part of the country, just Arizona, Nevada. And so this is what it does, is it allows them to push for nonsensical measures to show that we're working for you. And, at the end of the day, like you said, the issues that are causing black people unemployment or underemployment is discrimination based on my skin color, based on the perception of my temperament or behavior, or my level of professionalism, or my level of expertise or ability. I have nothing to do with, I won't say I have nothing to do with my hair, but those issues are the ones that affect me first. When you have black unemployment twice the amount of white unemployment, like as a statistical fact, that's not everybody having natural hair. When black women had straight hair and they was all wearing perms or relaxers, you were still not getting employed at the same rate. Black men, for the most part, have short haircuts. We're still significantly unemployed. So this is a way to obfuscate from real, actual political action taking place in the state legislature in the state of Michigan from BLAC.
Yep. So how I look at it is even, straight up and down, right? At the end of the day, I look at it as root cause. I'm very root cause oriented. And so if we talk about anything that's dealing with a outgrowth of the anti-Black sentiment of this country in terms of a manifestation of a trait that they can discriminate against, I don't want to talk about that first. I want to talk about getting rid of the actual root problem. And the root problem starts with countering the classism that's placed us on the bottom, and that's allowed us to be vulnerable to this stuff because they don't have any type of hair protection acts for any other group. And they wear their hair any type of way. They got eggs in their hair. They got blue, yellow, green hair. They got no hair. They got whatever. And
white people coming to work with dreads.
Yeah, white people coming with dreads, and they ain't even gotta have a crown act for that. And so even when you think about women, same thing. And so really it comes down to being Black in America, but specifically what America created us into by the classing of our bodies and our people. So if we're not talking about reparative, restorative, transformative justice that aims to flip the entire table over through a reparations program or something that addresses the systemic issues that created the classism, then I don't want to talk about an act just to deal with the fact that people are being discriminated on by their hair. I'm not shading that. Women's hair are beautiful. Black women have beautiful hair. But I am saying that this is not the first thing to put on your list.
All right. So hold on, still. Let's.
Oh, okay.
I know you got to.
We got to keep it moving.
Yeah, we got you.
It's quick. I promise.
All right.
But even the way it's framed, women's hair. You just said you face discrimination for your dreads, and I've told you the situation. So to even try to portray this as a female issue shows you what they're trying to do. It's not about helping the Black community. It's not about offering anything tangible. It's about having something to point to a demographic where you could say, see, we helping Black women. They're the backbone of the Democratic Party. We're putting you in a position to succeed. This ain't about the Black community. This ain't about freedmen. This is about doing more pandering. That's all. See, it was quick.
So, and I'll be fair, right? It's not specific to men or women, rather, when it's recommended, but BLAC, B-L-A-C, the commission actually jumped off with this being about women, right? So we see that's where that's coming from. Anyway, business recommendations, number 2.
Yep. Support a Michigan payday loan interest rate cap. And so if you go take a look at this recommendation, it's based around the fact that right now in Michigan, there isn't no cap. And I think when Black folks or in general folks take out a payday loan in Michigan, they would end up paying back almost 300% of interest, just, on top of the principal. And so we understand how predatory payday loans can be. And I think with this second proposal, the goal is to reduce, I think, the interest rate cap to 36%. And if you scroll down a little bit, Darvell, in that orange bold, it says what it is, right? So right now, a lender, somebody could go get a payday loan and it could cost them 300% over the original loan, and basically interest. And so 3 times what they, asked to borrow. And then they said there could be a situation where in Michigan, payday loan, those folks who take out payday loans, they could be in a constant borrowing situation where they have to take out another payday loan to pay off the prior payday loan. Yeah, because they're not keeping up with the interest. And so my opinion on this is that I think this is something that's I wouldn't say majorly significant, but I will say that it will help Black people that are currently being taken advantage of as far as the rates, but it'll also help out white people. So this isn't necessarily a Black specific legislation, because that 300% borrowing rate also applies to white citizens in the state. And so, I feel like, again, when it comes to addressing the direct issues of the Black community, I'll just state, just because of our wealth levels and our income, that this is something that would possibly benefit us. That's my critique.
What I'll go ahead, Stedman. I'll let you go. I always be the last one.
I mean, it's so it's a great policy as a policy for all people, right? Just to address the issues of predatory lending in this state. It's a great issue. They tried to do this at the federal level, but the person who stopped this, the main opponent of payday lending at the federal level, was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Hillary Clinton's former campaign manager and congresswoman from Florida, Democrat from Florida. She was one of the main opponents. She gets, Florida is where a lot of payday lending firms are headquartered. So she gets a lot of money from them. So you got a Democrat at the national level who doesn't support any type of reform from payday lenders because they pay her. And at the state, I'm sure they're pumping money in all the states. And so what you see is, like Brother Gerard said in the comments, if we had a state or a country that did its job and provided the protections for its citizens, economic, social, health, or medical, however you want to look at it, this wouldn't need to be an issue for the BLAC organization. This could be an issue that is already addressed as a state at the state level or at a federal level for all of us. But you got to make it like you're doing something specifically for Black people by just having this blanket program. Why are Black people having to use payday loans? Why are you having to pay off a payday loan by taking out another payday? I remember I watched this
right there.
That's the question.
I watched this thing on about prison, and this guy said, let's talk about how you get, and you end up being somebody's property in prison. He said, if I give you 10 soups, you got to give me 20 soups the next week, and then after the next week it's 40 soups. He said, I done seen guys turned out for 10 soups. And that's what this is. You getting turned out for payday loan for $100. $100, you got to pay $300 back. Is that what that is? 300%? Darville, you the engineer. Is that 300%?
Yeah, that's three times.
You getting turned out for 10 soups.
See, and again, like you said right there, it's, there can be very good policy recommendations that speak to issues that aggravate the Black experience. But the only reason that we're having the discussion within the context of policy for Black people is because this is another crutch used by an injured group of people. And you're not addressing the injury. You keep trying to just make the crutches less volatile, less dangerous. It's just a ridiculous way to try to approach this problem by coming in with band-aids so that the folks who are taking advantage of you have some restraint. The people who you're depending on have some guardrails that they have to abide by. But you shouldn't be depending on these folks, and that's kind of where this is missing the mark. And so putting this as a recommendation shows a level of disregard for how we got to a point where this is only Black people that you're recommending this for. Because if it's not just for Black people, then it's a universal policy and it shouldn't be in here. And now you're using our energy to push something for other people. And that is disrespectful, Black. That's disrespectful. And that's why we're already on number 2 and we still haven't hit a home run yet. So let's go ahead.
Let's go ahead and move to number 3.
3, include Black businesses in Michigan's $10 billion federal infrastructure projects. What you know about this, or you want me to read it?
No, you got this one, Darville.
So Michigan has a unique opportunity to help Black businesses overcome the barriers that prevent them from fully participating in state contracting opportunities. I'm going to read this first paragraph. Now, through the historic 2021 Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Michigan will receive $10 billion. The money includes $7.3 billion to fix roads, $563 million for bridge replacement or repairs, $1 billion to improve public transportation, $1.3 billion to improve water infrastructure, $100 million to expand high-speed internet, $1.5 billion for broadband investment, and another $110 million to boost the state's electric vehicle charging infrastructure. All this being said, they go on to state in orange, but more can and should be done to help Black-owned businesses thrive. So their recommendation is that Black Leadership Advisory Council urges the Whitmer administration to work closely with business organizations that serve Black business owners to help Black entrepreneurs get the resources, credit, and training they need to be able to participate in a meaningful way in the contracting opportunities presented by the federal infrastructure investments that are coming to Michigan.
So they already know we've historically been barred from the contracting, right? And just to give an example, this goes back to that conversation we had about parity, right? Like, what does it truly look like for us to achieve parity based on our numbers in the state? And so with this proposal that they have for including Black businesses in that $10 billion funding that's coming to the state, or that is left over from 2021, that's a good policy. You know, economically, we need more policies that will include us in it. The only issue is that when they're talking about that recommendation, is it coming with the creation of an office that's specifically tasked with making sure that happens? Or is it more so this global minority program again? You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, if in Detroit, for example, like if the citizens of Detroit was able to gain access to the federal contracting that's available in the city at parity, all Black communities would, significantly gain from an increase in income. And then on top of that, there would be wealth created from that. I got an article up, Darvell, but I'm not going to share it. It's called Detroit's Demolition Program Under Fire for Lack of Diversity. It says Detroit's blight remediation effort has been fueled by more than $148 million in federal dollars. It says the Free Press analysis shows that only 26% of the work is going to minority-owned companies, and among them, only one Black-owned company has received a substantial slice of the nation's largest federally funded demolition program. And keep in mind that Detroit is 76% Black based on that Chicago Federal Report Reserve. So this is what Black is talking about, aiming, or focusing on. But I feel like the recommendation is too weak to actually address what I just read, because there isn't a recommendation to say make Black Americans receive parity in all federal contracting, or grants awarded, because then that would actually address this root cause of us being disproportionately not included.
That is right. And one area I want to quote directly out of their document here is that, unfortunately, Black-owned companies often face serious challenges in contracting opportunities for large-scale infrastructure projects due to factors such as the lack of capital, inability to secure bonding or insurance, and the lack of access to credit, and less experience navigating the state's bidding process and lobbying landscape. So how do you systemically address this so that we don't have a repeat incident and it doesn't fall on somebody's will and somebody's mood that day to wake up and, as you say, work closely with to ensure that some Black businesses get in the door to actually compete? Because right here, you gave us the bullet points, Black. You said they don't have any money. You said they can't get insurance. You said they don't have credit. And you said they don't even know how to even go through the bidding and lobbying processes. Where does that come from? And how do you systemically address that? And if you think it's outside of your purview as a state of Michigan, then you need to be recommending that it get pushed up to the federal level. And so how you address that fundamentally is you secure means permanently through statutory through actual policies and programs that ensure that these Black programs, these Black contractors, they go through and they get training on the process for bidding and landscape or and lobbying if they need to. They get actual process for how they build credit, and they're going to have to be given money. And why do I say given money? Because they probably would have a lot more if all of the wealth that the generations that came before them, their grandparents, their parents, great-great-grandparents, had actually been able to hand down wealth that they should have accrued. And so when you start to unpack this, you find out that these businesses don't compete because they ain't got nothing to compete with. Whereas they go into the right side of this page and talk about white majority owned businesses being able to compete and how they have access to certain things. Why do they have access to things? Because they've been doing it generation over generation. They got the money to break into the market properly and they're capitalized. So that's where the issue thrives. And so just like you said, Ernest, like you can't, how you going to do this talking about urge you to work, urge you? What is that? Please, beg, maybe? What is that?
Well, so this reminds me of, remember when we met with Elizabeth Warren's campaign and we were going through her whole black whatever. And ultimately, when we finished going over it, we just determined that the best course of action was reparations. And so through three bullet points, that's what you see. Because the bidding process and what's being completely taken out of the equation is that these people, they live with these politicians. They interact with them. They go to church with them. They have social functions with them. Might have went to college with them. Might be in the Moose Lodge or the Elks Lodge or a fraternity with them. And so you're talking to these people about contracts on a personal level. Your kids play on the same travel hockey team or baseball team. Your daughters do ice skating or gymnastics together. And so this is not the same as I'm just trying to see if I can get my first big contract. You have an apparatus at your disposal that allows you to bid for these contracts that ain't about lobbying in the traditional sense. And it's not about bidding in the traditional sense.
That's true.
You see what I'm saying?
That's true.
When you look at our roads, that lets you know that there's something that they're setting their sights on when it comes to funding these projects. It's not about quality of work and it can't be about cost. Because if you're repairing the same roads every 5 years, the cost can't be a factor. You're paying for them every 5 years. Quality ain't a factor. You must be using some combination of the same companies. And so this is what you see. What they're trying to do is dance around the issue. It's reparations. That's what's going to help. That's what's going to help. That's the 11-point. This is the Conspiracy Brother Freeman Collective 11-point bulletin special. Reparations. I don't know if that's 11 letters, but it would be nice if it was.
So to that point, we got number 4 here. Support diversity on corporate boards and in C-suites. This is another softball ass recommendation to ask someone. Let me go and read. Ernest, you want to unpack this one, or you want me to go through it?
Go ahead and tackle it. Only thing I'll mention on this is we covered a while back in our show that there was like a 4% problem where across all corporate and executive C-suite boards, there was only 4% Black representation, despite certain cities having a 56% Black population or 13% Black population, or even like if the company was mostly 36% Black, etc. And so, I believe, like you guys, if we're talking about increasing the representation of Black folks, that would come with, some sort of strengthening of the current affirmative action bills or something that actually forces companies to hire African Americans who descend from slavery. So
that's strong. That's a very strong, clear way to make this very, effective, right? Supporting diversity on corporate boards and in C-suites, holding that there is ample evidence that including people of, here we go. This is what we're talking about on a sidebar. Any individual who sat on this committee, commission, whatever, Black Leadership Advisory Council, and thought that writing people of color in here was okay, tells you that their mind is already adrift in some space that allows them to negotiate or compromise what we could get. They will compromise it down to the most comfortable chair in the lobby and they will let themselves sit there and use people of color when this is supposed to be about us. And so if you tell me that you had to say people of color on corporate boards in order to get your point across, that means you don't know how much more potent and powerful having Black people on corporate boards would be. So you can't even
they couldn't say Black, and the name of the organization is Black, and they couldn't say Black people. So
terrible.
that goes to, like you saying, that it's all empty rhetoric. The name of your organization is Black, and you couldn't even say Black people in your own paperwork, your own slideshow.
And somebody might say that we're like nitpicking what they're doing here. We're not nitpicking. What we know to be the end game here is that this entire package of proposals or recommendations, it lacks any real weight in terms of its ability to make a serious difference. And it misses the mark for transformative change that is necessary to make a enduring impact that actually starts to change the direction of the racial wealth gap, at least in Michigan. So everything in here is just bull. So let's look at this. There's ample evidence that including people of color on corporate boards and in C-suites is good for companies' bottom line and corporate culture. For example, 2020 study by McKinsey and Company found that companies in the top quartile for ethnic and cultural diversity in their C-suite positions are 36% more profitable than those in the bottom. So wait a minute. Okay. Did it say again? Found with diversity, ethnic and cultural diversity. Recommendation. BLAC supports HB 4597, but believes it should be expanded to include people of color. We urge the legislator to hold hearings on expanded bill and pass it. We also encourage Governor Whitmer to sign the legislation. You know what, bro? Anybody looked at 4597?
No, I haven't looked at it.
Let me see. Business Corporation Act, people of Michigan.
No, I haven't.
It's not very long. Go ahead.
You want to read it?
I'm looking at it. I'm trying to understand what was it doing. Okay. I think it deals with female representation specifically. I don't know if there's a summary anywhere showing exactly of its intention.
Well, see, I think that could be something interesting to look up.
Yeah, it's for women.
The number of women CEOs or C-suite and board members relative to the amount of Black people. And let's see what those numbers look like. Because I think that's where you see this false allegiance to a common interest when you look at that number. But then, like we've talked about before, the type of Black people they're going to hire are the same type of Black people who are in their social group. You're not going to hire people like the four of us who challenge what they're actually doing, right? Look at the whole Black Lives Matter situation that's kind of unfolding before our eyes, where Patrice Cullors, they bought a $6 million Black Lives Matter house, and they threw an inauguration party for Joe Biden when he won the presidency and did some other shady stuff with it. They allow people like that to get in those positions of power, no charges being filed or nobody's beating down the door to arrest anyone for fraud, because that's what they want you to do. They're fine with you taking advantage of your own people. They're fine with you using violence of your people or people who look like you to enrich yourselves materially, because you don't want real change. It's not of interest to you for real change to happen. You just need to make money. And if change were to happen, you will be out of a job. If Black justice were to occur, Black Lives Matter would cease to have a reason to exist. It would cease to exist, right? Yep. And so they allow you to do this kind of thing.
So, okay. So anyway, to your point, HB 4597, it's a bill that is promoting inclusion of women on boards and C-suites.
And it says to include people of color. So the last thing I'll say is to what you said about the POC language, right? But this comes from the article, The 4% Problem, which is on the democracyjournal.org. It says Black inclusion isn't the only diversity metric that matters, but it matters a lot. The Black-white dynamic is still America's fundamental fault line, and previous efforts to bridge this rift have paid dividends to white women, immigrants, the LGBT community, and others. So addressing the lack of Black inclusion in mainstream leadership should be no different. So again,
did you just say a bunch of other people just benefited from our struggle?
Yeah. This is the fundamental fault line of trying to address our lack of leadership always results in dividends for other groups. So with Black, not even taking the assertive stance of Black is part of the issue. But we can move on to number 5, right?
Yes.
So number 5, better collection and analysis of criminal justice data. It says in Michigan, data that address the racial disparity of those incarcerated either lacks accessibility or is inconsistent at best. However, available information validates what people of color have known all along, that there is undeniable racial disparity in outcomes and inequitable treatment demonstrated towards persons of color at all stages of our criminal justice process. See, when you Black in politics, I think it becomes a problem for them just to say this is specifically a Black issue or a Black disparity.
Scary, man.
Yeah.
So scary.
Well, you saw how Kamala got indignant when she was pressed about it. She was indignant that she would not even consider doing anything only for Black people.
Yeah. So even with that being said, right, like if you're looking directly over to the right, it says, according to the Vera Institute study, incarceration trends in Michigan, Blacks comprise 15% of Michigan, but populate 37% of the jail and 53% of the prisons. That's not all people of color. They're not talking about that. I did the data breakdown of this, and it's consistent with these numbers, but I had 32% for all state, jails and prisons combined, but 53%. That's a disparity. Now, the last thing I'll say on this, guys, is I'm definitely with, supporting efforts for better collection and analysis of data. Where I think this goes short is it only stops at criminal justice data, and it should just be one proposal across the board for health data, criminal justice data, housing data, all of the main metrics that we need to be looking at. And with a better collection of data, we're just talking about a better sort and filter. Better metrics to say, here's what we should be focused on. Majority of the Black families living in Detroit have this amount of income, face these amount of issues, and they also make up this amount of the prison population. But, with that, what you guys got on it?
Step.
Well, I like that they could say Black when it's, prisons. It's Black. It's not people of color in prisons. So they at least acknowledge the disparity in incarceration. But like I talked about the last show we did, when you look at these numbers and you see that we outpace our population in all these negative aspects, you either are accepting that we are somehow inherently incapable of doing good as a group, or that they're cheating somehow and they got their thumb on the scales and it affects us negatively disproportionately. You know what I'm saying? I agree with what Ernest is saying. There needs to be more of a streamlined analysis of the conditions that affect us in this state in general altogether. And they don't need to piecemeal it like this. But, I mean, even after this is made known, then what? Right? What's the next step? Do they have a recommendation? Because what's the next step after you make this information known? Let's say this goes through. Then what? What's the mechanism that you have in place to correct this situation? What's the procedure in place to make sure this doesn't continue? Because we already know when it comes to drugs and crime or whatever, that whites and Blacks participate in the activity at the same rate. So we know that, outcomes are purely dependent upon police interaction and the interaction with the legal system.
So with that being said, again, when you know that the interaction with, law enforcement and the rest of the criminal justice system is already disproportionately against us, and we represent a disproportionate amount of those incarcerated, I I agree with Ernest that there should be better data collection, but it's like you don't have to chop this up 10 ways to Sunday to know what you need to be working towards. You don't need to know all the ins and outs of how police decide to engage with Black people and go and have community town halls and emphasize the importance of law enforcement commitment to communities and moving away from stereotype based policing. No, you need to flip the entire society's perception. And then a lot of people jump up and down screaming and yelling and hooping and hollering and gnashing their teeth about, you can't do that, that's too much, that'll never happen, that'll take 80, 70, 1,000 years. You're talking about doing way more than we can do. We need to do little bite-sized pieces. We got to do it in bits and chunks and all this distractionary piecemeal micro shit, because you don't want to do the real work of really holding the entire community, the entire country accountable and pushing this up to the next level. The state of Michigan can only do so much in a little vacuum. So yeah, go ahead and collect the better data. Go ahead and do that. But understand that the solution cannot be like, we gonna tell Michigan officers to be better officers and to be kind and gentler to our people. You almost lost to Trump. You got a lot of people to change if you're not going to change a lot of people. So, I mean, it doesn't look like you got any teeth in this training of law enforcement. Come on now. Who you getting to be officers? Anyway.
What we got on the, what's next on the list? I think it's tied to police.
It is banning no-knock warrants.
Yeah. Now, banning no-knock warrants, I think this is another one that Black people, you know, for the most part, I don't think we're against. But at the same time, I think when we're talking about like priorities, right? Like how many people are suffering from no-knock warrants is my question when it comes to this, because I wouldn't put that number of, you know, it's like most Black people are suffering from this. And, you know, as it relates to what has happened recently around like police and energy with Breonna Taylor and even other, you know, Black individuals who have been gunned down by law enforcement through no-knock warrants, I think those issues definitely, I just believe like in general, like when it comes to officers being able to be made immune, that needs to be addressed rather than the whole issue of no-knock warrants. Because if officers were actually able to be held accountable, we wouldn't have the issue of them killing us during, you know, the processes.
Yeah. And like I say, like just again, it's like anytime you put an element of control into a document that's supposed to be about how to improve the lives of the Black community, you have to ask yourself, why is the Black community the one who's having this disproportionate interaction with these type of situations? So when we talk about these no-knock warrants, are you telling me that you're disproportionately having no-knock warrants being executed on Black people? So why are we doing that? I'm not even asking you to stop doing no-knock warrants. I'm asking you, why are you having to do so many no-knock warrants on Black people, period, that you think it makes sense to put in this document? So you must have the data to back it up, right? By 2010, local police conducted an estimated 60,000 to 70,000 quick knock or no-knock warrants. And so the recommendation is the Black Leadership Advisory Council urges the House Government Operations Committee to hold hearings on HB 5013 and other legislation that would ban or limit the use of no-knock warrants or quick knock warrants. And we also urge the state legislature to pass meaningful reform and advise Governor Whitmer to sign the bill after legislature adopts it. And I'm just like, again, like, what are you got? Like, if let's put it this way, I asked this question. If there were no Black people in the state of Michigan, would you put this in a document of recommendation for the governor to do today? Ernest, I mean, it's not Ernest, but Stedman, you got anything?
No, they wouldn't. I mean, when you look at states like Oregon, right, where significant white population, and they had those folks having that standoff on that federal land for like 2 weeks. Remember, they had an armed standoff on that federal like bird preserve or whatever. And that was like not their first time doing it. It's like their second or third time having done that, something like that. And so somehow they always manage to interact with their own people the proper way. It's just for us, it's different, you know.
Mm-hmm. What we got next on the list, Darville?
So, education recommendations. Increase school funding. While Governor Whitmer has made the largest state K-12 education investments in the past 40 years and has worked diligently to bring equity to the state's school funding, Michigan faces daunting challenges on school funding front. According to Michigan State University education professor David Arson, Michigan has been the last among all states in school funding growth since the passage of Proposal A. Per capita and school funding declined by 22% between 02 and 15, but even these devastating numbers don't fully describe the impact on Black students. During that same period, funding for at-risk students dropped by 60%. Meanwhile, districts are still dependent on local property tax base to fund school facility construction and repair, replicating existing inequity. So, the fiscal year 2022 budget represents a historic investment in public education. Governor Whitmer's fiscal year 2023 budget continues to recommend a weighted student funding formula and includes these increases. Recommendation: Michigan needs statutory changes to increase school aid fund revenue by at least $3.6 billion and establish a permanent weighted funding formula based on student and community need and universal early education. Although the governor cannot implement either of these unilaterally, we recommend she convene legislative leadership to draft and introduce this legislation and propose more significant increases in categorical funding to at-risk students and students in special education through the budgeting process.
Yeah, so this is an all lives proposal that I'm gonna just throw out there because it's general for all students. And it doesn't necessarily address Black disparities in education and schooling. But what I will say, though, is the language that they have for this recommendation is the language they should have had around establishing a reparations task force or something that actually goes into, creating funding for like 1 billion, right? But directly addressing the economic needs of the Black community in Michigan. And then about that property taxes piece, that's all going back to the wealth because again, if you like Malcolm X had a quote on that, right? Like poor neighborhoods, poor job, poor school, poor teacher. That poor job, you're only going to pay lesser and less taxes or whatever, and so it's a cycle that's going to repeat. So
exactly.
Now it's called the Black Leadership Advisory Council.
Yeah,
that's what that stands for, right?
Yeah.
Now, is this a Democratic organization or a state organization? Because they mentioned in Whitmer like so glowingly and partisanly that this can't be an objective state organization. You see what I'm saying? Whitmer's made the most funding. Is this Democratic campaign material?
That's what I felt like when I was looking at it. I'm like, look what Whitmer done. Look what Whitmer done. I'm like,
I don't care about that. I just want to know that it's done. Are you guys making sure that whoever's in office is doing it? And then for that to be the case, I know Whitmer was fighting graduates of Detroit High School. They were suing the state. I know it started when Snyder was still governor because they couldn't read. A lot of them couldn't read. That graduated high school and couldn't read. And they were suing, saying that their constitutional rights were violated because they were not given an education. And the state countersued or their claim was that they're not obligated to provide them an education. And so Whitmer, when she first got into office, I know that she was still fighting I think they eventually settled. But I mean, this to me, the way this is going, this just seems like a partisan organization that is going to be used to try to help Whitmer with her Black outreach for the next election cycle.
Man, I tell you what, they probably gonna run around from city to city talking about, well, Governor Whitmer did this and she's gonna do this and she did that. And so now this becomes, well, we have to reelect Governor Whitmer if someone's going to be able to bring these things into fruition. All right. Because you can't expect some other governor to listen to a commission that was born and created specifically by the past governor that they defeated. Anyway.
So number 8, reject censorship in history instruction. I think this is directly tied to efforts we've seen around critical race theory and as it relates to Black American history in general has been a flare up of a lot of white folks and even some Black Americans who don't want this history to be taught as it relates to slavery and the dynamics in America. And I believe like this proposal is something that could all be packaged together in a single education proposal, right? Yeah. So something where we're addressing censorship of like certain history as it relates to African Americans, but at the same time, maybe that cultural acknowledgement of African Americans in curriculums and whatever they was talking about building out with the police force. That's really where you do that with students, right? Have conversations, town halls, build upon understanding the race in this country, and we can start from there. But that's really my 2 cents on this, guys.
And that's what it is, right? American history is complex and deserves a rigorous academic examination. They just go on to say that some stuff that I ain't even gonna read. So the recommendation is Governor Whitmer should veto any bill that prohibits discussion of or academic inquiry into the complex history of America, including our nation's history of race and gender discrimination, as well as any bill that attempts to ban efforts by schools to correct discriminatory practices. This is a recommendation. Like
they giving her slam dunks so she could say she did something for the Black community.
Oh my God!
She got all these Black elitists, Black middle class and elitists. Because no poor person making a task force. Nobody with a criminal record making this task force.
I want to be sure because it might be. It might be.
I don't know, man.
Doctors this and doctors that. You gotta be, pinkies up. Watch, I'm gonna run into one of them. Watch, they're gonna be like, "Oh, I seen that your video. You said that." But
are there any men on the task force? I know when I watched, I didn't see any talking.
There's even a few white folks, I think, too. So,
fantastic, full of inclusion.
Sounds about right.
And I know sometimes it may come off this way to some of the guests. I don't have anything against women, personally, but why are they in this singled out in a Black organization? It's not a Black and women's organization. It's Black. So, I mean, at least the assumption would be that if you're a Black female, your contributions to the nation's history is going to be talked about, right? I would assume that we don't need to say, well, we'll talk about Frederick Douglass, but not Harriet Tubman or Sojourner Truth or Ida B. Wells. We'll talk about Martin Luther King, but not, Rosa Parks. You see what I'm saying? So the fact that you talking about gender discrimination, the way that you place that in there is the same with putting POC in there. It's the attempt to obfuscate. It's the way that you allow, the same with affirmative action. You allow women to leech on to it, and then white women are going to be the main beneficiaries of these kind of policies. And they're really just empty anyway. Because like Gerard said in the comments, how you get any of the stuff passed with a Republican legislature? But that would require effort to get out and mobilize people to come out and vote.
That's what they want to waste the energy on. This type of stuff.
Right. You don't want to mobilize people to come out to vote, give people something to vote for. You just want to, I can veto something so that my 4 years in office, nothing gets passed. But then when the Republican gets in the next 4 or 8 years, because it's going to happen, I did what I could do. You know what I'm saying? Everybody want to wipe that, and then she's going to be a lobbyist or some bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Anybody could have beat the Republican in the last gubernatorial election because nobody was voting for Rick Snyder or any Republican after the whole Flint water crisis. You could have ran a dirty dish rag against the Republican, and they would have won. You essentially had a mandate to do anything good in this state. And this is all you got. She coming wearing buffs and cooking coney dogs.
Oh,
and that's all you got to show for it.
Not the buffs there. What's the next one we got, Darvell?
No, man, listen, I done ran across some stuff. I started looking up these folks.
All right, go ahead. So that's what we're working with.
Who's in the council? Oh my goodness. All right. We got some boomers. We got man, you're gonna love this one, Stead. You're gonna love this one. The one woman from Detroit, Sadie Sarr. Did we already talk about Sadie Sarr? Sadie Sarr. You Google her. Sadie Sarr, founder of African Bureau of Immigration and Social Affairs.
That's how they bumming.
I'm sorry. Oh, it just showed. It just rolled in. Like, I'm sorry, man.
That's how they coming, man.
African Bureau of Immigration and Social Affairs.
Well, you said the one representative from Detroit.
Oh my goodness.
Well, see that's a good segue that you had. It's not really a segue, but so they had a question that you could ask. You had a question and answer.
Oh yeah, let's go to the
So I typed in my question: do you feel the need to delineate descendants of freedmen, also known as chattel slaves in America, and immigrants to this country, and your analysis of the data concerning the Black community? No response. They didn't approve it. They didn't say nothing about it. And so what does that do? What does that do? What that shows is that you can have people who, theoretically have not been aggrieved in the same way, having input on the redress for these issues. Well,
Yeah,
I watched the show.
I mean, she Black. I mean, she Black. She know how to talk on issues. This Black, because all our issues are race based. I need y'all to accept this, man. Like, that's what we need to wrap our heads around.
I'm looking on the website for SAR.
Oh,
and the pictures that they got are not even in Detroit. They look like they're all in New York.
Oh, wait a minute. We wasn't supposed to, this is a sidebar, you guys. I apologize.
Let me get to number 9. Number 9 is mental health supports for the Black community. And I think this is around addressing, some of the discrimination we see. It says here, it is also a fact that constant subjection to racial discrimination and socioeconomic disparities has contributed to the increased mental health challenges in the Black community. Suicide rates have consistently risen, especially among young Black men. You scroll down a little bit, Darville.
Oh, yep.
Yep, the COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated this number, especially in cases where mental health issues have not been previously diagnosed or addressed. Additionally, there's a lack of Black mental health service providers accessible to the Black community. So for me personally, I think mental health awareness in the Black community, that's something that's important. But should it be a policy proposal to the government as something that they should immediately address? I'm going to just lean to the side and say no. And I'll say that just off of the strength that I believe there's a ton of other, issues that could be focused on that we could spend this energy on. And, to give examples, there's housing crises in Detroit that will continuously contribute to the mental health of Black Americans, you know what I'm saying? Certain poverty situations, certain violent situations where, it's not going to do them any good. And so I think having mental health services available will help us, but at the same time, I don't believe this should be like the top 11 proposals, in my opinion.
Well, look at that. So state officials should aim to increase the number of qualified and eligible Black service providers that serve them. How do you do that? How do you do that? Just on its face. How do you increase the number of qualified and eligible Black service providers? How? You got to have more people going to school, right?
Well, you use the educated Black population that currently is coming out of school, and that would probably be foreign doctors. So, but they'll be Black, though, still.
But that's my point. At best, you'll get foreign doctors, but even foreign doctors, apparently, there's still a shortage. You looking at the website, eh?
I'm sorry.
Pull it up.
No, pull man. It up. This ain't funny, man. Quit. This is not nice. She's a nice young lady.
I don't have nothing against her as a human being. I love her as a child of God.
We shouldn't be doing
But you ain't the one.
I just want to share this first. So just so we know who we're talking about. This dang it. This is her.
I put the website in the
yeah, I got the website too.
But you can't.
Oh, it must be her. Okay. Okay, but here's a click.
Hey, she's employed. She's not facing employment discrimination.
Beautiful.
Let's get to that last one, guys.
Man, I know.
Yeah, I know we're gonna have to pivot, man, to some,
this is not good.
I know,
this is shiny ball right now. This is shiny ball. This is not good. I want to open. You want to click? I want to click. Oh, let me go back.
Scroll. You just gotta scroll. Just scroll. Just scroll. New York.
Ooh, we got this. Oh,
New York.
Ooh, got the scroll. Got this guy.
New York.
Got some white hands.
New York.
Got some programs here.
And I mean, it's all specific. So
It's
if we was talking about addressing the needs of Native Black Detroiters, Flint, and Saginaw people, I'm sorry, this ain't gonna cut it, man. It's just it doesn't even care about them.
She identifies herself. Read that last line. She identifies herself proudly describes herself as an African immigrant Black Muslim woman.
So African is its own like minority group. Immigrant Black is its own Muslim and women. So there's 5 different minorities.
Intersectionalism.
But all right, last one, man, so we can switch over to something more pivotal. The last one is more equitable distribution of state health funds, and I think this goes back to the contracting, right? Like, if they wanted to, it could be again a proposal that seeks to gain parity across all disparities that currently afflict the Black community, specifically in economics, health, education, and even what was the other one? Like if we wanted to throw home ownership in there, we could. You know what I'm saying? And so, my main argument to this is that we do understand the need for us to have, more access to certain health funds, et cetera. But again, when we're looking at the issues that our community is facing, I wouldn't argue that we need the health funds more than we need the actual economic relief.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's the main argument for me. But that's all I got, guys.
Man, listen. Stephanie, you got anything before we close out on this and move to the main topic?
All of these issues, diabetes, infant mortality, heart disease, I wonder if things like heart disease and hypertension are issues that resulted from the trauma of slavery and segregation. Because like I've talked about just briefly on the show, looking into epigenetics, which is the study of how your genetics can be altered from traumatic experiences. A leading expert on this is Dr. Gabor Mate. He's a Hungarian Jewish Canadian physician, and he studied the ways in which the Jewish Holocaust. I need to remember to do that because that's not the only Holocaust, and so to call it the Holocaust implies that it's the only one of any significance to anybody.
Right.
So the Jewish Holocaust. His parents I think he's either survived it or his parents survived it, but he spoke about how descendants of those who survived the Jewish Holocaust saw a change in their genetic makeup. They're more likely to be have anxiety, issues with weight, eating disorders, all kind of problems. And so I wonder if those types of issues are a direct result of that for our communities, because it seems like it can't just be food, right? It can't just be food, because a lot of people eat unhealthy foods in America, especially, and they don't have as higher rates of heart disease and hypertension as we do, right? And so even you look at like the Inuit, I don't think they call them Eskimos anymore, but the Inuit communities, they eat blubber. They eat whale blubber. And they don't have those high rates of heart disease and hypertension that you would say would be caused by the unhealthy food that we eat. And so I think, reparations is the answer to all these questions. If it's 10 points, if it's 11 points, the last point, the answer to that question is reparations. But that's the hard question. That's why we talked about last show. It's easy to be an ally when it's free. When being an ally means I can put a yard sign up that says Black Lives Matter while I live 10 to 15 miles away from the nearest black person. And and I'm in the region with the most black people in the state. Yeah, I support diversity, equity, and inclusion. When black people don't go to my kids' school, I support black education. When black people don't work, I don't have to worry about my daughter or son dating black people. Yeah, I love the idea of black people. But when you have to be around me, it's no good. So this kind of empty allyship, this no skin off my back allyship, it's not going to change anything. Reparations is the only answer to all these questions.
Yeah, this is crazy.
And number 11, Darvell.
Was that number 11?
No, that's 10. That's 11. My bad.
Oh, there's another one.
Look, it's at the bottom. You should be able to wrap that one up.
Civil rights recommendation. There's compelling evidence that strict voter ID laws disproportionately restrict voting access for voters of color. Journal of Empirical Legal Studies study of Michigan voters showed that minority voters were about 5 times more likely to lack access to ID than white voters. The same report found that would-be voters in states with ID requirements for voters are more likely to incorrectly believe that access to ID is required to vote, even though states allow for provisional voting. Recommendation: BLAC urges state officials to remain vigilant in the fight against schemes to disenfranchise.
Yeah.
What the fuck is this?
That's another all lives. So I counted about 4 or 5 all live proposals.
Oh,
and the other 5 were low priority black policy proposals.
What is this? We urge the government to give us free cookies and a cupcake every morning too, because y'all just saying we urging everybody to do something good this morning. We urge you to eat some eggs. We urge you to eat some oatmeal. We urge you to get your cookies in. I don't know.
I urge you to give us reparations.
I mean, if y'all doing such loose and fast statements, why ain't they put reparations in here? I mean, it's just an urge. What's the problem?
Right. And like you heard me say this, and I'm going to say it forever. I posted the StreamYard link, I think.
I sent it to him. I sent him a text because I didn't want to put it in the public chat room.
I don't know any black person who is interested in voting who does not have an ID. I don't know any black person who don't have an ID who is interested in voting. So this, to me, the only reason they're interested in doing this is because they want to flood the zone with people who shouldn't be on the books. And people are like, well, it can be a barrier. If you can't get access to voting, I left it in the YouTube comment, the link.
Oh, you sent it directly to him. Man, you better delete
Well, I sent it in the YouTube comment. I just
you didn't put it in here.
Copy and paste it. I don't know if it's a hyperlink. But if you can't, it might cost too much because black homeless people really want to vote. They make voting IDs free. Get somebody a voting ID for free.
Gerard better check the group me, man.
I put it in the chat. I put it in the YouTube chat. I tagged him in it.
You better go check the group me. Hey.
He probably had some of them drinks or something. Talking about put it in the chat.
But no, I mean, like to build off what you were saying though, Stead, when it comes to reparations, right? When we listened to that whole conversation, we did pose a question at the end, and we'll put that in like it's its own short video for you guys to check out. But the thing is, they never even addressed reparations one time during that conversation. And then on top of that, we were bringing, addressing things like delineation, they kind of steer shy of those conversations. But then lastly, when we pressed them and said, where do you guys stand on getting like economic proposals for situations like what we've seen in Flint, Benton Harbor, and even in Detroit as it relates to these economic disparities? And we was given like some pretty good word salad about we need to focus on what's achievable and what's realistic within this time frame and what has the most momentum. Reparations has the most momentum in the Black community than it has had in the last century. On top of that, there's actual legislation occurring in several other states. In Detroit, the city has a reparations task force. BLAC did not address the city reparations task force in Detroit. It steered shy of the reparations conversation, and it also didn't bring up the 3 bills introduced in January 2022 by 3 Michigan representatives for actual reparations funding bills. And so they look past all of that because, again, they're trying to focus on what's possible. And apparently the Crown Act, increasing education, fighting against schemes that disenfranchises people of color, that's all what's possible. But helping the Black community specifically, that ain't possible. And what we've seen, I'll say with what we've seen as of late, that's no longer really acceptable, especially given situations that we're about to talk about, right?
Right. No, it's definitely not.
And I want to piggyback off that because it's important. It fits. And, you know, I'm sorry, I won't be long-winded. They just gave, so Joe Biden wanted $33 billion for Ukraine, and they just approved $40 billion. That no Democrat voted against giving them money. 57 Republicans in the House voted against it, opposed it. 57. And I think there are more Republican senators opposing it, but at the time I last checked, only Rand Paul opposed it. Now, what are we looking at? The Squad, Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Corey Bush, Jamal Bowman, the other 2, I can't remember their names. AOC, the Progressive Caucus, none of those people opposed giving Ukraine $50 billion, approximately, would equivalent to $57 billion over the span of this whole monies, including the $40 billion they're trying to give them. None of them are opposing giving them that kind of money when we are in a significant recession coming, headed almost like to the Depression. We're headed, gas is astronomically high, food astronomically high. The price of services and materials astronomically high. And I'm sending $57 billion over. And when I talked about Ukraine, y'all didn't even want to watch the video. And we sending them $57 billion. What's up? How are the Democrats on your side? And I'm not saying the Republicans on your side, but what they like to talk about a lot when you'll see is they'll say, a lot of members of the Pan-African community say white people practice pan-Europeanism. Well, these white Republicans ain't trying to send Ukrainians no money. So I don't know about that. But they ain't trying to send them no money either.
They said y'all gonna have to catch the next package from somebody else because we done sent you enough packages from over here. So we need to put some packages together for America right now. And one of them needs to go to Buffalo, New York, y'all, because they just lost one of their safe spaces. So this is a piece from CNN. Everyone is very well aware of what happened in Buffalo, New York. Tragedy, heinous act committed by this individual who self-identifies without question as a white supremacist. But we're not looking at this from a lens of white supremacy today. We're looking at this as an anti-black terrorist attack. This ain't just some, oh man, he hates everybody. He may have written that, but who did he attack first? Have you read the manifesto? Do you understand his strategy? His strategy was straight for us first. We were the first one on the list for a reason. That's why it's anti-black. But, to kind of crack into this discussion and talk about the framing of what happened here before I hand it over to Ernest to kind of unpack some of his thoughts and Stedman, I just want to open up with this piece here on CNN. I know CNN is not the most reputable news source on the internet, but I do think that what they've said here is pretty interesting. So the piece that they pushed out today, featuring this woman here, her name is Felicia Dove. She's talking about the shooting that took place in the supermarket. And she says, they're quoting her here saying that we didn't have much and you took what we had, what was left. Felicia Dove fails to fight back tears. Let me make this big for y'all. Felicia Dove fails to fight back tears as she talks about the massacre that shattered her community's haven in Buffalo's Maston Park neighborhood. Hold that word, massacre. As she talks about this, Top Supermarket was a place of community, a safe space for us to meet, talk, and be together, she told CNN. There's no one here who hasn't visited this Tops. It was ours. Even if it wasn't the best, it was ours. And now our safe space has been infiltrated and taken from us, and that is something we are mourning. That beloved Tops is the only supermarket in a 4-mile radius within this largely Black neighborhood, and one that took more than a decade to get. And we need to talk about why it took them a decade to get a grocery store. But it has now been scarred by a deadly rampage whose remnants are evident in the stretches of police tape that now guard the store. It took them a decade to get a grocery store, Ernest. Is that one of the items on Black's list to get grocery stores into Detroit? Like ones that are good, or to deal with the
No, I mean, no, and then that's one of the things I noticed too, is they was talking about the food desert, right? Like the fact that that grocery store is needed, and with this shooting, you know, I know that in the state they're now talking about how they have to give free food to this Black community and find ways to get food to the community, because not a lot of folks have transportation, and a lot of people did rely on this specific area. And so with the history of hate crimes, if we know United States history, we know that when a hate crime occurs, we got to not only look at the victim families that are impacted, but look at the communities that are scarred in the way that members of that community now have to leave it because of fears of more racial tension, more racial violence, or members of that community are now impeded because now things have been destroyed, like certain infrastructure or certain access to food or transportation and things like that. So that's one thing I do want to keep in mind. Stead, what was you gonna say, Stead?
Well, Detroit just got 2 Myers. I want to say within the last 7 years, maybe 10. But one is where the old state fairgrounds were, and the other one's on 6 Mile and Grand River.
Mm-hmm.
And Whole Foods has been there maybe like 12 or 13 years, and that's downtown. But that was the only, Whole Foods was the only major like grocery store that was here. You had these small like chain kind of places, but as far as like a Kroger or something, there was nothing here. Mm-mm. And Meijer is a Michigan grocery store.
Yeah,
their headquarters is in Grand Rapids.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I just seen a tweet today talking. They was just dogging out that Meijer on 8 Mile because that Meijer on 8 Mile be having issues.
It does, but I mean, it's the I just went there today. That's where I was before I came here. I mean, it's the you got to pick. Do you want to drive to 10 Mile and Shaner to go to Meijer? 13 Mile and Gratiot or the 13 Mile and Little Mac to go to Meijer, or do you want to go to the 108 Mile?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like that's what's close. Or I mean, there's Kroger's between there, but if you want to go to Meijer has a larger selection. It's usually a little bit more affordable than Kroger in general. Do you want to go to Kroger or do you want to go to Meijer? Gerard said he still can't get in. I tried to send him the link, but I guess it ain't working for me.
He ain't here. What's up, brother Jay?
Hey man, thanks for adding me. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'll let y'all shoot, man, and I come in when I need to come in, bro.
We got you. All right, good to have you. Let me read one other thing here. This is gonna get real. This is talking about Black life right now. They talk about the real guardians of this grocery store being the hundreds of residents who have swarmed Jefferson Avenue mourning, praying, and beginning their heartbreaking journey towards healing. And they talk about the tragedy on that typical Saturday morning, how it turned into a violent nightmare. Now, here's the interesting part. The slaughter has left this tight-knit community angry and heartbroken. But the East Side residents like Tony Marshall have not let their grief keep them away from each other. Let's talk about Tony Marshall. This is Tony Marshall, y'all. Tony Marshall spends majority of his days at Tops, picking up and dropping off employees and shoppers. And you see, he's got on even a Tops shirt. Marshall spent hours under the sun, grilling hot dogs on the corner where Tops loomed behind him, only a few feet away from where he discovered bodies of 3 of his friends the day before. He said it was chaos looking back at the Tops parking lot. People crying, people screaming, and I joined them when I saw those bodies all by the door, bodies of my friends. Now, here's the interesting point. Marshall, affectionately known as Mr. Tony, is cooking for hundreds of residents in mourning on Buffalo's east side. The jitney driver, who spends a majority of his days at Tops picking up and dropping off employees and shoppers, says he's emotionally drained. I'm going to stop on jitney driver. Y'all know what a jitney driver is?
Yeah, man. August Wilson had a play about it. You know what I'm saying? Fences, Ma Rainey's Blue Bottom. A jitney driver, basically back in the, it was basically our taxi service. You know what I'm saying? Black people, coming together, or shall I say, I love to always introduce freedmen people making a way out of no way, and this is a very just a sad event, man. Another, here we are, 2022. Basically the middle of 2022, and we're still dealing with the same discrimination, targeting that our ancestors dealt with in freaking 1862. It's wild.
Conspiracy brother, were you familiar with jitney driver?
No, I wasn't offhand. I mean, I know what a jitney is, but I wasn't familiar with with respect to this individual.
So in this regard, I was looking it up, trying to make some sense of it, because that word caught me. It was like my first time really experiencing it. And so I did pick up extensively what you said, Gerard. It was basically an unlicensed taxi driver that was, put to use within the community to move people to and fro, right? And so when I think about that in regards to him always being at the Top supermarket, it's either that majority of the people in that area, that 1 mile radius that he serves, who know him, who have a relationship with him, they just need to go to the grocery store, or he actually drives a little shuttle that the grocery store operates, because he did have on a Top shirt. But I say that to point to the point that he has a very thriving role in the community as a jitney driver, which points to the social economic positionality of that community, right? The fact that they have a thriving business for a jitney driver tells you what we're talking about, and how our people manifested an entire store over a decade that they then said it wasn't the best store. It wasn't in the greatest shape, but it was our store. And then they had a guy to get them to and from there. That was the condition that these people, who were mostly older as well, right? Who lost their lives shopping in.
Yeah, so I got some articles on the Darvell that do want to cover, but that I think we could do it later, because that'll talk more to the victims and the actual lives of these freedmen that were lost. But if we want to talk about, this white supremacist, right? This 18-year-old man, we'll call him, right? Smart enough to think about the guns, putting together the whole manifesto, making sure his routes were clear. He's smart enough and capable enough to be charged as an adult, in my opinion. But when we look at historical moments like this, even though, they're pretty brutal, and like, I want to say for our community, is weakens and saddens our heart. But what I want to say is that these moments also empower us, because it's all about the energy that we use after these moments to kind of define what's going to happen next for our community. And so with this white supremacist, similar to the situation that happened in South Carolina with Dylan Roof, where more freedmen lives were lost, it's all about what we do with this energy afterwards. And I feel like as Black people in general, we need to wake up to the reality that more needs to be done for our community if we truly want to change the trajectory. Because like Gerard said, we're in 2022. And what you read as far as like that Black man who's seen all those bodies of his friends, that's a direct parallel of what we could read in 1860 about Black people who was outside and watched their family members be massacred. And, I feel like until we actually address the root cause of white supremacy, which is i.e. I don't believe reparations will solve reparations, but I believe reparations creates the legislation that significantly weakens white supremacy. And we do that by attacking it directly, which is, in this situation, I would argue for more protections, but there's other things outside of this that we would need.
Yeah, I would
I
say
mean,
that I say that it disables it helps to extremely cripple the environment under which white supremacy can actually get to us and harm us. It really,
exactly. So
it,
instead of one security guard who was a retired police officer, you could have had a actual black security team. You know what I mean? A black security company that would have been able to protect this place and put safeguards around. This establishment. That's what, if we had not been hindered by the racism in this country to allow us to participate fully in the economy, we would have been able to have supermarket chains that would have been able to hire and contract, as at will, security, black security firms that would have made sure that their officers had the body armor that the assailant had, to be able to protect us. You know what I'm saying? Peace to that brother that he did his best in trying to protect those folks, and lost his life as a result of, and mind you, with the whole gender divide, what I'm saying? That was a black man that was in protection of his community. Many times black men are demonized and say that we don't protect our community. This black man lost his life in trying to commit to protect his community.
The thing that sticks out to me in all these situations, the thing that enrages me always in these situations is that the suspect always manages to get away alive. Whenever it's us, and you could say, well, look at the subway guy in New York. So there's one. But when you look at the interactions between, and maybe the police are less likely to kill violent offenders, and but when it's a guy with a loose cigarette, he's getting choked to death. When it's a kid accused of robbing a liquor store or whatever, he's getting shot. Right? When it's a kid walking home minding his own business, he's getting shot. When it's a kid at a gas station playing music he's in the backseat of his friend's car playing the music too loud, he's getting shot. When it's a man with 2 joints in Louisiana, he's getting shot. When it's a little girl sitting on the couch, like here in Detroit, and the police throw a smoke bomb in the house, she's dying. When it's a young woman, like in Dearborn Heights, needs her flat tire change, needs help, getting shot. When it's a woman in her own house, and the police go to the wrong house, no knock, she's in her bed and thinks it's an intruder, she's getting shot. How do we account for that? How do we account? Even the guy in Colorado who shot up the movie theater. Look, there he is right there looking like a nut. There he is. It's the guy I was thinking about. The guy right in the center looking like a straight pure nut. How did he make it out alive? How do these people make it out alive? How do they always manage to make it out alive? Why don't the police ever feel threatened by these people?
Because it's them, man.
Right.
We know where the police we know where the whole police apparatus came from. There's just another graduation of slave catchers, bro. And we're the target of it. It's disheartening, it's sickening, and I don't know how many other adjectives and adverbs that I can say about it, man.
But it blows a hole in the whole concept of the need for training, because apparently you can do your training well when you want to, right? These folks don't just be, they are heavily armed and or armored individuals, and they're going in alive. So you know how to de-escalate or whatever, defuse all these situations when you want to. And this is why we haven't done it. We might need to do it about qualified immunity. Qualified immunity. I watched something from the it was a conservative. It's a conservative think tank. I forget the name of it now, but they had a debate about it, about qualified immunity and whether it should be or shouldn't be. And it really kind of taught me a lot about how qualified immunity works. It's not just for police. It's for all government officials. They all have qualified immunity. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to get it overturned. It's not because police just have it, but it's because Nancy Pelosi have it, Joe Biden have it, Mitch McConnell have it, Kevin McCarthy have it, George Bush have it. And so because all the judges have it, and so because they all have qualified immunity, it allows them to remove any personal responsibility for bad decisions that they make. And so, you know,
it allowed them to keep the job separate from their personal actions.
Right.
But there's no such thing.
Like an LLC to kill? An LLC to kill?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was just thinking, Darvell. It's like it's like a corporation or something, you know what I mean? You separate the liability from the actual shareholders and officers of a corporation, which they got from the 14th Amendment, which is the hypocrisy and of all of this, because that amendment was meant to protect the freedmen that came out of slavery. It's the added salt in the wound that they came out with. They came with these rules, out of something that was meant to protect us coming out of the most vulnerable state, that this country has ever made a people come out of. That's why we need to have reparations. We need to have the restoring of the Bureau of Freedmen Affairs, something to that extent, to give us, that leg up that we've had that leg down, since that time.
Yep. So, man, no, it's a very unfortunate thing.
Hey, Darvell, I put another image in the group chat to talk about something else, because just mentioning reparations, right, Gerard? I'm pretty sure our audience seen this, this white supremacist terrorist, his actual gun. And on this gun, he has hashtag BLM, MOG. There's other things. But on this image, Darvell, you can't see it, but I'm going to go ahead and put the other one. I just want y'all to see both sides of the gun. But on this side, you see BLM and the names of certain white supremacists. He also has the name of the victims of the Wisconsin Christmas parade. White people across the nation have been treating that as an actual terrorist attack by black supremacists, even though it was a drunken driver who, ran his car into a group of white folks. But if you take a look at this image that I just shared with you, Darvell, second one, what does that say on that gun right there? Here's your
reparations. That's
yeah.
Ooh, I got that image. I need to post it to Facebook also right now, because
this is man, Yvette Carnell did as well. It lets as sad as this the situation is that the issue of reparations is on the minds of many people, and it's not small. It's not a fringe movement. They know what they owe us, bro. They know what they owe us. Cut the check.
So it was the Federalist Society. So that slipped my mind. They're a very influential conservative legal organization who is responsible for, I think, vetting all federal judges for the past 30 years, something like that. So, but on the point what y'all just made, when you look at what he's written on his gun and the ways in which he behaved and the way he's dressed, you see that these individuals figure themselves to be at war with us, right? He's wearing fatigues or whatever. He's got a military weapon, or at least similarly analogous to a military grade weapon. And I'm sure the police officer, you can't tell because all them tattoos is real far away. But I'm sure he's sympathetic. We've shown you the executioners gang in LA. We've shown and talked about the 2006 FBI study about how white supremacist groups have infiltrated law enforcement in the United States. This is not new. This is not new. And then when I talk to y'all about the Nazis in Ukraine, I know you got the pictures, but I don't know if you want to pull them up. The guy is called the Black Sun. It's a Nazi symbol. He had it on his badge, on his jacket. He had it pinned to his jacket. And the Nazi group in Ukraine that the U.S. gave 50 is trying to give $57 billion to, has it as part of their emblem. They've changed their emblem, but the emblem uses the Nazi wolf's angle, also the SS is also known as the SS symbol, and the Black Sun symbol in their emblem. And this is who the U.S. government, we talked to you about Operation Paperclip. We've talked to you about the ways in which the U.S. government has funded Nazism around the world. Internally, they funded authoritarian governments around the world. We've talked to you about this. So when I brought up the whole thing with Ukraine weeks ago, months ago, why are we talking about this? They're not going to have these people coming here into our communities. Ideology don't have a border. And he drove 200 miles to do this.
Agreed, Stedman. And that's a great point and segue into everything that we've talked about previously about the whole Ukraine issue, right? Here it is, our United States government supporting, quote unquote, the Ukraine, resistance or what have you. But many of that resistance is the source and the beacon for many of these white supremacists here in the United States as an example of the Deutschland, fatherland, you know what I'm saying, protect the race type of ideology, replacement, so on and so forth, man. Is way more intricate and way more whatever words I could think of at the time, you know what I'm saying, is hella deep when you think about it, man. At the end of the day, this whole idea of this replacement theory and so on and so forth. Jason Black, I had posted in our group me and for whatever reason the post that I posted didn't show the graphic, but more so than anything, he covered, like, this guy did a like damn near 180 page manifesto in regards, and he was very thorough for an 18-year-old, bro, to be this thorough about, he was doing basically interview questions of himself of why he chose and what he did and why he did, and ultimately he basically stated that, you know what I'm saying, that the white population is being replaced by minorities, and that any minority must be taken out, but more specifically, freedmen must be taken out, because freedmen, how that white supremacy is working, as a global system without a headmaster, is that what are the condition of the freedmen? Are they still at the bottom? Oh yeah, they good. Okay, yeah, everything's on track. The trains are running. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, Gerard was going to say to that point, one thing about the manifesto is that it is a mirror copy of the Great White Replacement Theory that was written by the mass shooter from New Zealand who killed over the 51 like Muslims or Christians that was out there. But basically, Peyton Gendron made a copy of that report and included his own sections. But in that Great White Replacement Theory, this symbol does come up again. And that shooter, I think his name was Trenton. I can look his real name up, but he actually had connections to the Azov Battalion, based on the New Zealand government's findings.
So what we got here is we got a guy who's technically somewhat connected back to the Ukrainian military forces in a way through this shared ideology. And we're supporting these military forces because of some bullshit feud we got with Russia. Not saying that Russia doesn't have their own beef with us, but in general, we're blowing billions of dollars across the pond to Ukraine over this shit. but our people are here suffering. And at the same time, while we're sending billions over there, they got one of their own counterpart agents over here shooting up our supermarket. It's like a Ukrainian guy just shot up a supermarket in Buffalo.
Exactly.
At least ideologically, he supports that organization. And so this is what we're talking about. And Joe Biden wants to go and stand up and talk about we got to get guns off the street and bullshit. And
that's a distraction.
That's not the answer. Share that article, Darville, but you got to stay. I'm just bringing up the article that shows in 2019 how they linked the New Zealand guy to this battalion. It's in the private chat.
Yeah, I got it.
So I was listening to a guy. His name is Scott Ritter. He was a former weapons inspector and military member, and he was breaking it down. He said, so what they try to say now when they talk about the Azov battalion, when you talk about it in Ukraine, they say, well, they were only a small part of the military, but they got absorbed into the greater military. So whatever. So he said that would be like saying that the Klan existed, and rather than get rid of the Klan and put everybody in prison or something, you said the Klan just got absorbed into the U.S. military. That's all.
That's a great one.
How is that better? You see what I'm saying? How is that an acceptable course correction?
Right. And at the same time, here in America, right? You know, to try to tie some of this in, we all know what's going on with Young Thug and YFNN Luciano. You know what I mean? Sorry if I mispronounced some of the names, but you have a state local RICO, you know what I'm saying, type prosecution going against black people. Yet and still, our country has never done that to any of these white supremacy groups.
And you know,
none whatsoever.
That's something that's been being talked about, Gerard, as far as like actions, right? People have been saying, where is the RICO for the conspiracy of hate that has existed in this country, specifically with white supremacists and the networks that they work with? Why hasn't there been a broad indictment against the banks that help fund the KKK, the corporations that helped hide them, politicians that were associated, that all the way linked down to the trigger man who ultimately killed the person? That doesn't really exist.
Right. That doesn't exist, right? Why? Because America, this is what America is and what they export, and it comes back around, you know, many decades later. You know what I mean? Because the bedrock of America is the down in the freedmen. You know what I mean? White supremacy, like I said, they know how does white supremacy is working is how much of a foot to neck do you have of the freedmen? You know?
And what you got to understand as a nation, America is concerned with power. And I was watching this. I sent it to y'all. I don't know if y'all got a chance to check it out. Frank Analysis, but he was talking to a guy named Mike. I think it's Mike Earhart or Mark Earhart, and they were talking about the connections between Rhodes Scholars and like the global, like the World Internet Economic Forum or whatever. And he was explaining how the U.S. needs and fund, like the U.S. and the West funded Nazism, but he said that the U.S. almost uses an Anglo-American ideology where England is still the ideological head of what we do. He said Winston Churchill gave this speech in like 1947. 1940. He said I didn't even know this. Winston Churchill lived at the White House for a month after Truman died. I mean, not Truman, after Roosevelt died. Roosevelt said he knew he couldn't trust anybody in his cabinet but his son. He said Truman was basically the equivalent of George Bush II. He was just an idiot. And what the whole objective was to have a British brains, or the Anglo brain and the American brute, to further British hegemony around the world. The British and the Americans funded Hitler. They funded the Nazis. This is something you can look up. We discussed that a little bit still before.
Into some tinfoil regions.
No, this is something you can look this up. I mean, this is objectively. Henry Ford used to send scrap steel to the Nazis for the railroad.
Okay,
this is a known fact. Hitler gave Henry Ford the highest civilian medal that the Nazi Party could bestow upon a civilian. This is well known. And so the issues with all of this stuff is when you understand, like I talked about before, the ways in which these groups of people think, you become indoctrinated into their ideology. So you can't stand for truth and justice and be a Rhodes Scholar. You don't get to do that. You don't get to be a Rhodes Scholar if you stand up for truth and justice, because it's not about grades. It's about mentality. You have to show yourself. And it talks about the Council on Foreign Relations, but what it does, it breaks down the ways in which the international apparatus uses authoritarian governments. And we've seen that. We've seen how the U.S. allows authoritarian regimes to exist. From Uganda, Museveni in Uganda, right? From, what was his name in Zimbabwe after they killed Patrice Lumumba? What was his name?
Mugabe?
No, not Mugabe. That was after him.
Zaire.
Yeah, Zaire, not Zimbabwe. Zaire.
Okay.
Mobutu, Seseko Mobutu. They allow Papa Doc Duvalier. They allow these dictators to exist. Pinochet. How do they allow these dictators to exist for tens of years, decades? Family, even in the Sandinistas. I didn't get to talk about it a lot, but the family that killed Sandino, right? They were in power for 60 years in Nicaragua. There was dictators that you like any you ever seen. But the U.S. allows these people to stay in power because it's easier to control one person who will control the masses than it is for the U.S. to allow countries to be free. That's why in Iran, they put the Shah in place and overthrew the democratically elected president of Iran. So this is why these kind of issues are happening.
So okay, let's get back to this piece that we pulled up here, though.
Yeah,
I think that was very. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, Darvell, to Stan, like I already know we're gonna cook on the political tip, but for this article right here, the only section I wanted to highlight, because I did put another article up, was it just shows that the links have emerged between the shooter Bryn Tarrant and the Ukrainian ultranationalist movement, which is the Azov Battalion that Stan was talking about, and it says his manifesto alleged he visited the country during his many travels, and that's kind of where he picked up on the symbolism and kind of also has some connections with those folks that was out there. And so, again, there's a direct link from, him going back to the New Zealand shooter, and even like the New Zealand shooter being inspired by Dylan Roof and things like that. So I think all of these white supremacists are connected, but at the same time, I think the history does matter. And so it's like, go ahead, Darvell, you got it.
I was going to say, so that makes us bring the question to bear. Do we need to start bringing up this discussion item around how there is a connection and ideology between the Azov battalion that we're essentially supporting by allowing the U.S. government to continue to support Ukraine and not tell them to eradicate the Azov battalion in order to gain that support, and how the Azov battalion and others in that region have stoked the fire of white supremacy in the U.S., because we got one example already. And so we don't know that these guys don't have some type of ideological connection, but we know they was wearing the same badge.
Well, since you bring it up, John Conyers, I got my hat on. John Conyers, we talked about this, but I never said it on the show. John Conyers, and I forget the Republican congressman, were instrumental in making sure the U.S. did not fund Ukraine because of the Nazi Azov battalion in 2015. We talked about it. And then what happened? Within a year later, John Conyers what?
Excused the sex scandals.
Right, and had to resign. And right after, the U.S. started sending money and stuff to Ukraine.
Yeah. Hey.
So I got my hat on, my tinfoil kufi on, because I don't have no proof that those are linked. But that man had been in office 50 years. You never heard anything about it. But when you need to get him out of office so that Ukraine is the most corrupt country in Europe. And that's saying something when you know of countries like Bulgaria and Romania, countries you've never really heard of. Albania, Eastern European countries that are poor. Ukraine is more corrupt than they are. And you're giving them $57 billion unaccounted for? You could just give me $100,000.
Where that money
just give me
going
$100,000 a year, and don't ask me no questions.
So I think like to swing it back around, right? Because I know Gerard, you said something earlier that was interesting when you brought up the 13th Amendment. And I think these issues that we see today as it relates to like these mass shootings or the current position of the Black community, the freedmen community, I'll say that what we see is that I think it's the failure to exercise the 13th Amendment, the failure to exercise the Civil Rights Acts, the enforcement acts that were created to specifically deal with these issues, which they classified as the incidents of slavery. And so, Darvell, I did paste the link to Title 18, Section 249 of the U.S. Code, and it talks about hate crimes. And this goes back to a show we had last year, and Stedman dropped this link for us to kind of explain it. But in the findings section, there's 2 points, number 7 and number 8, that directly talk about what I'm speaking of, which is the ability of Congress in our government, as far as like the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are concerned, with dealing with the badges of slavery. So it's almost like through these bills, Congress does have the power to directly attack slavery, or I mean, not even slavery, but slavery and the badges of the institution. But what we've seen is that they have yet to take that action that we're looking for, which is specifically the reparations piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And protections. And
Yeah.
that was all because of the worst president. It wasn't Trump. It was Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was the worst.
So here it is. It says, I'm gonna read this from Google real quick, but it says the 13th Amendment. We all know that it, officially ends slavery, but the Supreme Court has held that slavery or involuntary that the 13th Amendment prohibits slavery or involuntary servitude. It also empowers Congress to end any lingering badges and incidents of slavery. The court, however, has failed to provide any guidance as to how courts should define the badges and incidents of slavery absent such congressional action. And so they said the bigger issue is that when we look at the 13th Amendment, people think it's all about slavery and Black people not being enslaved. The 13th Amendment is really about addressing the badges of slavery, because you can't incorporate citizens if they're still being treated like slaves.
Yeah, no.
And so if you scroll down, Darvell, the findings in this article, just real quick to number 7, it talks about this too. Right? Yeah. So if you scroll up a little bit there, it's on the second page.
Second page.
Yep, right there. So you see where at the bottom it says number 7 on the right side.
Yep.
Towards the bottom. Yep. Yeah.
For generations, the institution of slavery and involuntary servitude were defined by race, color, and ancestry of those held in bondage. Slavery and involuntary servitude were enforced both prior to and after the adoption of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States through widespread public and private violence directed at persons because of their race, color, or ancestry, or perceived race, color, or ancestry. Accordingly, eliminating racially motivated violence is an important means of eliminating, to the extent possible, the badges, incidents, and relics of slavery and involuntary servitude.
And then number 8 too, and that's it.
So number 8, both. At the time when the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States were adopted, and continuing to date, members of certain religious and national origin groups were and are perceived to be distinct races. Thus, in order to eliminate, to the extent possible, the badges, incidents, and relics of slavery, it is necessary to prohibit assaults on the basis of real or perceived religions or national origins, at least to the extent such religious or national origins were regarded as racist at the time of the adoption of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States. Wow.
So what that's saying is, to me, if freedmen was considered a race, or if Black people was considered a race, that they would have had all the protections they needed under the 13th Amendment. But again, our government has failed to exercise the power that they've already been ordained by the people. You know what I'm saying? That's really the issue at hand right now. And I think that ties to reparations, because when it comes to hate crime bills, Black people keep saying, well, we need more hate crimes. But really, we just need Congress to act upon those protections that makes this thing a real deal.
Exactly, Ernest. You're right. Because if the American government truly respected and did, what those 3 amendments, what I'm saying, that came right after slavery, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, we wouldn't have never needed a Civil Rights Act of 1964. We would have never needed a Civil Rights Act of the Voting Rights Act of 65. You know what I'm saying? And we would never need a Housing Rights Act of 1968. We would have never needed those things because it was all right there. All the power that, the U.S. government had was in those 3 amendments to protect our freedmen lineage, you know what I'm saying, to make us whole and right. But they never acted they never acted as such. And therefore, we can always, this is the power of being a freedman. Not black, not African American, not all these other terms. This is right there in the Constitution, bruh. We don't have to go nowhere, and we don't have to recreate no new terms or we're not Moors, or we're not, all these other terms that everybody wants to. We don't have to be pretendians and all of that. It's all right there in the U.S. Constitution. The rights that we have, what I'm saying, that protect us. You know what I'm saying? And we can go back to the United States and say, hey, look, y'all never protected us, man. Y'all never did what you said you were supposed to do. And because of that, now we're owed this. And cut us a doggone check. You know what I mean? I'm sorry I'm sounding pedestrian and all of that, but no, cut us a check, man, because at the end of the day, y'all owe us, man. This, you know what I'm saying? This ain't no doggone handout. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? This is, this was written. This was written. But anyways, I cede the floor.
And the last thing I do want to say, just for our audience on the education tip, the civil rights bills that we had were also like means that our government could have used to, repair us from the incidents and badges of slavery, or the relics of slavery. And one example is the Enforcement Acts, which is the KKK. It's literally called the Ku Klux Klan Acts of 1870, 1871. And literally after the passing of this single bill, it said hundreds of men were indicted in North Carolina. And the Attorney General at the time secured over 700 indictments in Mississippi. Most prominently in 1871 1872, South Carolina trials, the military provisions of the act were used to make hundreds of arrests and force up to 2,000 Klansmen to flee from the state. So, like, if you guys read into the Enforcement Acts, it really was to stop the Ku Klux Klan from harassing Black people in spaces that they live, limiting their freedoms as far as the right to vote, move in certain areas of the country, or migrate to certain areas of the state. And what they did was any person associated to these organizations would be tried on the grounds that they are harassing that community. And until we get these type of protections today, I think we'll be in that same loophole.
And ultimately, this is just to kind of put a bow on this in my own words. This is why, I'm kind of fed up with the Democratic Party specifically. I'm not advocating for nobody to go to the Republican Party. That's not what I'm saying. But, you give these people your vote, you give them your time, you give them your energy. You do what you can because you believe that they're going to finally do something for you. How many times you got to get hit in the face before you realize what's coming? How many times do you have to be abused before you stand up and say enough is enough? These people have abused us and have been abusing us and have been abusing us, and we continue to take it. And we've got to be willing to let them fail. All these other groups have said it. All these other groups have done it. The Ethiopian community, the Ethiopian community in Virginia got a Republican governor elected because they knew the Democratic Party, they felt, were hurting their community in Ethiopia. When you look all through our government, how many Cuban Americans in our government have passed legislation or enacted policy or guided U.S. foreign policy in a way that destroyed Cuba? How many Eastern European, former Soviet politicians and administrators and have made sure that they could get and guide U.S. foreign policy in such a way that it would destroy Russia, that it would destroy the Soviet Union, that it would push U.S. hegemony. Look at Chinese immigrants, how they're pushing the narrative to affect China, the communist Chinese government, or Vietnamese immigrants, how they're pushing to affect change in Vietnam, against the communist Vietnamese government. That's what happens. But we don't have anybody in office who speaks for us. Nobody's trying to push or steer U.S. policy to benefit the freedmen. Nobody's trying to do anything that benefits our political ideology or interests. Everybody's using our laws or our fight or our body or our labor, or whatever you want to say, to elevate their own causes. They get in office and they help for their community. And that's what they should do. And we don't have anybody. Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Ayanna Pressley, none of the black politicians voted no on this $57 billion. None of the black ones that's Democrats. I don't know about the black ones that's Republicans. None of the black ones that's Democrats voted no on this $57 billion. And I ain't heard them say shit about studying what the long-term effects is going to be. I ain't heard nobody say they need to have a panel about how it's going to affect Ukraine with the proliferation of weapons and the illegal weapons market, how it's going to affect the economy in Ukraine, whether it's going to cause inflation, whether it's sustainable long-term, what effect it's going to have on our economy, where the money's going to come from, who going to fucking pay for it. None of that. For 30 years, we can't get a study on the effect of slavery on niggas, and you want to give $57 billion to Ukraine in 2 weeks. Fuck y'all.
Fuck them. Piece of reparations, man.
I would stand on that. And since we ain't have your mans now, I guess we'll close it out with a little meme to what Stead was kind of talking about, so y'all can understand. This is kind of how midterms and general elections has been looking since the Ukraine war popped off. And so with that, we need some attention. The Freeman community, man, we need some dollars, man. And with that being said, it's peace, love, and reparations, man. We're going to catch y'all on the next one. Make sure y'all like, subscribe, comment, and stay tuned.
Peace, love, and reparations and booty clapping. Peace, love, and reparations and booty clapping.
Peace, y'all.
Discretion is advised.
This is terrible. Where y'all find this stuff?
Hey, it's accurate though.
Like Twitter.
Hey, you just got to have Hunter with a crack pipe in the background.
Man, we're gonna get demonetized.
We monetize?
We ain't got no money.